People of Lassen County. Well, they're not interested in this particular debate if you want to know the fact of it. And if it's going to be resolved by just 100 people sitting here, the 75 people sitting here in the room, then our democracy is already jacked up. But I think the issue of putting it on the ballot, and before you go out and say Lassen County is for this, I think we need to let a vote of the people to take place. And that will happen in June. It's not going to happen anytime sooner than that, unless somebody wants to cough up $60,000 to put it to the test. And one thing it doesn't surprise me by the people who are here, and I appreciate and commend you for your passions.
Let's put it on the ballot then. Quit talking about it.
We are talking about it. So I've got the floor, Mr. Chairman. I'm not surprised by the people who are here, but I am surprised by those who aren't here. And I think it's the lack of diversity of the representation of the groups in our county. Where are the groups that are in this county that make up the decisions? That's what has to be focused on. And I think just the narrow base of one group who has a lot of passion, and I commend them for their passion. I could tell you when it comes to the voting population, I've stood before them numerous times, and I know, and they can be fickle too. And when I think, oh yeah, let's go charge out this door, they make it clear, you can go, but adios, we'll see you later, and they'll go in a different direction. History is not on the side of this issue, and I think when you really examine the historical records, and I think when you look at the proposal itself, the idea that we're going to go and convince a majority of the 120 legislators or a majority of the 535 members of Congress, both the Senate and House combined, I can tell you right now, it's more than just a fairy tale. Our senators that represent us, one of them, as I indicated at the last meeting, when she came to Susanville, when she ran for Senate in 1992, and she stood over at the senior center and she told my wife, and my wife was all excited about, let's create the 51st state of Northern California. It wasn't Jefferson, it was Northern California. And she made it real clear. She wanted to be the senator of all of California, not just some of California. That's the mentality. I would say in the last 23 years, she hasn't changed her attitude one bit. She's probably made it more intense. And she's the one that we're going to have to rely on to vote for us in the Senate. I can tell you right now, both of these bodies is pretty much DOA. You might find a handful here and a handful there that will do it for grandstanding purposes, but in reality, they're just going to all scoff at the idea. But to me, why waste our energy? Let's take the grievances that we've accumulated and let's put a full court press on Reynolds v. Sims being modified. And you say, well, how can you change a Supreme Court decision once they make the decisions? Well, Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 put forth a separate but equal doctrine. And for a good 50, 60, 70 years, and some people say it still hasn't been resolved in terms of practicality, we divided the races and we had separate but equal. But Brown versus Board of Education was a landmark decision in 1954 that began you might say, the end of the Plessy versus Ferguson doctrine. So the fact that 50 years ago Reynolds v. Sims came down doesn't mean that a Supreme Court today can't, change its course and direction. And so to me, I think there's a lot of merit in terms of pursuing that. And I think that is the position that I would be very strongly in favor of, is pursuing, because getting 5 Supreme Court justices is going to be a lot easier to obtain than to get a majority of 535 or a majority of 120 in Sacramento. And I think that's the reality of history. This idea that we're going to let our people go, that the urban majorities that have the dominant control are going to let our people go, like as though we're Moses and we're going to lead us across the desert to freedom. If you look at it, any time a minority population has been oppressed, has succeeded in breaking away from the majority, they've had to do that through some sort of armed conflict. And I heard most everybody at the meeting last time basically say that we don't want to do that. We're not here for the armed. I'm sure there's a couple people that got their guns ready and let's start shooting, and that's fine. I commend their passions as well. But that's the reality. That's what we're talking about in terms of history, and I think we have to appreciate that. And the problem is a lot of people who aren't here do appreciate that. And I have to say, I've been amazed at the feedback I've gotten making my rounds around town of the people, what they have to say about this idea. So let's take it from something that can be looked upon as farcical, and let's take it and let's do something serious. Let's go after Reynolds v. Sims. Let's get the Harlan dissent, prevail. And then once that happens, that doesn't mean that we automatically are everything hunky-dory. Each state, and there were 38 states that were affected, we only had the federal plan for a short period of time from 1930 to 1965. So 35 years out of our 165 years, we had this so-called federal plan. In order to reinstitute that, it would take the California legislature to adopt it. It would take us putting a constitutional amendment into the state constitution. It would take a vote of the people. It may take us 5 to 10 years it took the Farm Bureau 5 years. They introduced the idea or concept back in 1925 when the population of the state was starting to shift to the south. Up to then, the south was pretty sparse in population and representation. And it was the north that had the dominant aspect of control of state government. And they were the ones that came up, and it took them 5 years to be able to get even that plan put into place that went into effect in 1930. But the good news is, if you look at the voting patterns of our voters, and we have equal representation now. It just happens to be, the reality is there's 38 million people living in California, and only 27,000 of them are in Lassen County. And the idea that 27,000 could have one senator and 38 million, the rest of them would be dividing up. LA County alone would have one senator for 14 million people. That's what Reynolds v. Sims was partly addressing. But the reality is that those folks don't even vote. Brian Dawley, out of the 80 assemblymen, got the most votes, the number of votes of any candidate running for the state assembly. He didn't get the highest percentage, but the people up here turn out and vote. A lot of his colleagues that he represents and works with down in the assembly, they got elected with 20 and 30,000 votes, and he got elected with over 100,000 votes. So the key is to put something on the ballot. I think a signature drive throughout Northern California easily could qualify what sort of reorganization plan that a revised Reynolds versus Sims decision would allow us. And I can tell you, we go to the polls, get all our neighbors there, we could probably outvote them even though they've got more people, because they don't care to vote for whatever reason. So that's how the representative system works. That's how our constitutional system works. And I can tell you right now, it's those, one last thing. The economic numbers that we were presented. I have to say, Mark, I'm really embarrassed when I look at those. You can't balance the state budget by using federal income tax as a revenue source. They don't hand it back in cash. You might get it back in some sort of what you're dealing with, the Sierra Army Depot, with the military stuff, or the federal prison, or the Forest Service employees and what they do or don't do. That's how that money comes back. It doesn't come back to each of the states as a cash revenue. The whole thing is totally jacked up. Financially, it doesn't pencil out the way you've got it worked out. And then, I just throw this out to those with the green shirts. Okay, you guys are really good at enunciating. 98% of the people out there, all of us, have an anti-government, anti-establishment attitude. We really don't like the way government works, and we're all good at expressing that. And that really drives, I think, a lot of sentiment. People say, okay, this is a chance for me to vote against government. We will. But the reality is you can't stand there and say, our motto is less government, less regulation, but in order to get people to support you, we're going to keep things as is in terms of our spending. It doesn't work that way, and it won't work that way. And I think that's where the model that you guys put forth is totally jacked up. And so all that combined together, Mr. Chairman, as I said 2 weeks ago, I can't support this. I would support us endorsing and supporting a measure to go after Reynolds v. Sims. I like to see that. I really appreciate Mark spotlighting that in his presentation, because that's probably the best ray of sunshine I've seen in 50 years in terms of addressing this particular issue. And I don't think we should lose that in the midst of all this other stuff that's cluttered around. And the other thing is, if the board's going to adopt this, you got to adopt it so it goes on the ballot. And I don't want people out there saying that Lassen County endorses this until the voters vote on it in June. I think that's a necessity. And you guys are going to have a tough time getting that vote passed here in Lassen County, in my opinion, but I'm only one.
Thank you, Jerry. I move we accept it because in here it is going on the ballot, correct?
That's the premise of it.
Well, you'd have to come back with the things to put on the ballot that corrects that direction. Yeah.
That's it. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Eric?
We need to change that to, in the fifth whereas, to proposed implementation of draft.
So is the motion to adopt the declaration and petition with the proposed change to include the word proposed in the manner as specified by Mr. Elwell?
Subject to the vote of the people.
Subject? Yeah.
And is the second assent to that?
Yeah.
Does the second assent to that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I would just suggest as a point of clarification so that it's not misconstrued, that the declaration, if this is the intent of the board, will not become support of the Jefferson movement until such time as the vote of the people is heard. Just so that it's not misconstrued as being support today, it'll be support as of the date.
It's adopted under the condition that it's approved by the voters in 2016.
And I just think that's important to clarify.
And that's the plain language of the resolution.
Yes.
The declaration petition, sir.
Okay. Any more discussion? Madam Clerk, pull the board.
Sorry? Can't hear you.
The order that they're in the city?
Sure.
Okay. Supervisor Chapman?
No.
Supervisor Hammond?
Aye.
Supervisor Alba?
Aye.
Supervisor Campbell, please?
Aye.
And Supervisor Park?
No.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, people, for coming and all your information. We'll take a 5-minute break, then we'll have the Honey Lake Valley Resource Conservation District. We'll take up the RCD. We got all the laws and orders here. We need to go back to your office.
Is that Eugene? Hi. Who was that lady that spoke before us with the multicolored jacket?
Okay, we're going to give out some employee recognition for years of service. Latoya Sal, not here. Okay, you're going to take it. You're going to have to help me here, Diana. Sokolowski, we thank you. You're going to have to help me to get it right. Thank you. We'll come up here. Okay. In appreciation for your 10 years of employment in the County of Lassen, we, the Lassen County Board of Supervisors, would like to take this opportunity to present you with this certificate of recognition and thank you for your time and effort. Thank you so much.
Diana is an amazing partner in our probation department. She's currently a probation assistant, but she works everything from checking people in, answering phones, keeping stats, managing files, helping all of the probation officers out with everything that they need to do. And her dedication is truly outstanding, and we really appreciate everything that she does for us. So thank you.
Jessica? Dude. Jessica, in appreciation for your 10 years of employment with the County of Lassen, we, the Lassen County Board of Supervisors, would like to take this opportunity to present you with this certificate of recognition and thank you for your time. Thank you. Would you like to speak for or against?
Jessica has actually worked for the county for 13 years. She was missed a few years when that was noticed, we talked about that, and we made sure to get her on to offer basic service. She's worked her way through several departments within the county, and I am so glad that she wound up landing in the probation department. She has been an outstanding partner with all of our business operations and our fiscal operations, and keeping me on track and making sure that we get everything done. Her passion and dedication is very much appreciated, and she is the first one that is out there looking for revenues and looking for money-saving options. So she's been, just a gem for us, and I really appreciate all of the work that she does every day. So thank you.
Jennifer, Brandon?
But I try hard every day, and I do my best.
Jennifer, how are you? In appreciation for your tenure and employment with the County of Lassen, we, the Lassen County Board of Supervisors, would like to take this opportunity to present you with this certificate of recognition. Thank you for your time, efforts, and commitment. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say a few words about Ms. Branning, if I might.
You bet.
Ms. Branning assumed the position of acting Chief Probation Officer, a year and a half, 2 years ago now, in a time of transition in the department, and has been just a wonderful asset, I think, for the county, trying to make that difficult department run and find cost savings with the juvenile hall. And she's been one of the best department heads, if not the best department head, as far as keeping me informed, and I think the board as far as progress and input on what's going on there. I really appreciate Jennifer, and I hope she's here for a long more.
Thank you.
You got something?
I just want to say that I've worked with Jennifer all those 10 years, and it really is great to have her as Chief Probation Officer. I really enjoyed working with her. She's a great partner, big supporter of our Family Solutions wraparound program, which helps our department save a lot of money in group home costs. And that's a great program. I'm really happy to have her support there. And we have a great partnership. We share a lot of information, and when we disagree on things, it's because we both are thinking about the best things for families and kids. So we appreciate that.
And I appreciate your mentorship.
Mr. Chairman, what does the sheriff think
I can say lots of good things.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Laura Derrigan?
She's not here today, but I'll say a couple things about her.
We don't mind, go ahead.
She works night shift. She worked last night, got off at 6 a.m. and has to
You're
work.
the reason she's not here.
Yeah, I'm here. She's not here. But
Okay.
she, anyway, she's the longest tenured corrections staff in the jail. She does a great job for us. She was from the Westwood area when we employed her. She's just very committed to the agency, the organization, and our cause. So just want to congratulate her on her 15 years, and I'll express your guys' support.
Good, thanks. Nathan is here.
Nathan's not here. Nathan Spalding, many of you probably know Nate. His family's been in this county for a long time. He does a great job for us. Right now he's assigned to patrol. He's one of those guys who you can ask to do anything, and he just gets things done. He's a real nuts and bolts guy, very reliable. A couple of years ago, when we really were struggling behind realignment in the jail, Nate at one point in time was sort of an administrative sergeant position. He was doing concealed weapons permits, search and rescue, boat patrol, and other things. Just sort of all these sort of administrative duties. He was taking care of all that and then covering patrol shifts. Well, with the issues we're experiencing in the jail, I had to ask him to go. We had to assign a sergeant into the jail. He went back to patrol, and since then he's been covering his patrol shift and also maintaining all those other responsibilities. It's a challenge at times, but he won't complain about it. He just finds a way to get it done. There might be delays in getting something done at times, but he always steps up for us. So I wish Nate could be here today. Again, he's working this afternoon into the nighttime, so I'll thank him for it.
Thank you. look after your RCD. I'm not sure maybe we want to start out now.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this matter, I believe, was agendized as a response to a request from the board to agendize it for today on at least one point of discussion, but in the meantime, another point of discussion came up, and I felt it important that we agendize it for that second point as well. The first point that came up that the board had actually asked that be agendized was the prospect of, there were some concerns expressed through public comment at a previous board meeting, and they related to the Honey Lake Valley Resource Conservation District essentially being dominated by its duties and obligations for the water services, to perform those services pursuant to the decree. When it got appointed, if you will, to serve as the water master and to employ a deputy water master, that thereafter it has essentially dominated its efforts, dominated its time and attention, and so as I understood it from our last meeting and the request to agendize it was, what are the circumstances under which another entity could be appointed to serve as the water master? And the answer to that is fairly plain, and it's found in the Water Code, and I think it's also found in the court decree, and that is that, and we saw this in 2007, I think it was, if history serves me right, 2006, 2007, somewhere around there. And there was a motion presented in Superior Court. Now, I think there was either unanimous or one step short of unanimous agreement to change the water master from the California Department of Water Resources to the RCD, and that's essentially the mechanism by which it would occur. Is it would require a petition or a motion or legal action to Lassen Superior Court, which is the court that initially rendered the decree related to the Susan River and its users back in, what, the 30s, late 30s, 40s, somewhere in that, I forget the date. But that dovetails nicely with the California Water Code, which says that, and I believe it's section, was it 4050, if I'm not mistaken. It's in your packet. 4050. It requires a petition of 15% of the conduits, essentially. Now, as I understand it, a conduit is a point of diversion on the river, and some landholders may have more than one point of diversion on their land. So, I don't think you can say that 15% is the equivalent of 15 people. That may not necessarily be the case. But that's essentially to provide standing to make the motion, if you will. It could still be a contested motion in court. But ultimately, it would require an order of the court to replace who the current water master is. More to the point, if the idea is that the Department of Water Resources, and I saw a newspaper article today, and if the court were to be entertaining the idea of appointing the Department of Water Resources, as I understand it, the Department of Water Resources has the authority essentially to turn it down. I don't think there's any legal obligation for them to take it. I believe that there's provisions within the Water Code for them, even if they are appointed, to say we're not going to do this anymore. And so I don't know how that would bear out. But that's the essence of the legal framework associated with replacing the current water master, which is the Honey Lake Valley RCD. And that's the one issue. The second issue is the appointment to fill a vacancy that exists on the RCD board. And the county did receive some correspondence from the executive secretary at the RCD, which I included in your packet. which I found to be an interesting kind of inquiry. We know that the board member resigned, or at least the letter of resignation was accepted by the RCD board on February 25. And that by resolution of the RCD, it is the duty of this board to fill that vacancy, and the authority to fill that vacancy exists for 60 days after the vacancy occurs, or you receive notice of it, essentially. There's some qualifications under 9314 of the Public Resources Code related to the appointment to fill that vacancy, but the essence of it is I believe at this time the Board of Supervisors has the authority to fill the vacancy. The email was an interesting email. It was expressed in terms of, does the board have any interest in filling the position? Well, the board is supposed to fill the position because, contrary to what a speaker said last week, it's not my fault. The actual RCD board asked this board to fill those seats by appointment rather than by election. So I found that an interesting take, but that's an assignment. So this board has, I think, the obligation to at least pass upon the issue. And so the clerk, the county clerk, I'll be notifying shortly after we leave here today, she should post that in accord with the government code provision that's referenced in, I think it's 9314, and there's some notice requirements. And then folks who are interested can get notice and can apply, and then those applications will come before this board, and they can be screened, and or this board could decide not to fill it, and at which point but this board has the opportunity, has the right to pass upon that issue, and then approximately 60 days thereafter, the authority to fill that spot would be vested with the RCD. That's my take on it. I hope I answered the questions, and there you have it.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Comments from the board? If not, we'll take the public comments. I have two cards here, one from Mr. Dow and one from Mr. Caboti. Jay?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. So I spoke 2 weeks ago to you, and just one point of correction on what Mr. Burns said. The water code almost says that. The water code actually is talking about petitioning the court to move away from DWRs as a water master, not to go to them. Although I don't think that the court would argue that it would apply going both ways. And you may want to check that law, but it specifically talks about the department moving away from them, which is synonymous with DWR. So with that, so I guess you have the bad timing of holding your board meetings after the papers come out. So I read an article this morning in which Mr. Giese was quoted, and he was one of your new employees, and he stated that he was mandated to fix the RCD and the Water Master Service. I wasn't at that meeting when you appointed him. When I say you, I'm talking about the board as an entity, not individuals, so don't take anything personally. But I wasn't at that meeting, but I find that odd that this board would have mandated him to go in there and fix everything. So I'm not sure that that's accurate. And secondly, he was critical of the Water Master Advisory Committee, and that's made up of, and this was decided early on in our infancy of this effort to do our own Water Master Service, of representatives from basically each reach of the system, and it's had some modifications. But he was critical of them, and we moved away from DWR because of cost, and because they didn't provide a local water master, and because they didn't provide year-round service. Those were the basic issues. Cost was the big one. And we struggled, and we had to have an entity that could collect the taxes and provide, and hire the service to be done. So the RCD willingly stepped forward for that. I shouldn't say willingly, there was some reluctance. However, and we formed this Water Advisory Committee, which was made up of the users and provided, from all the areas. So Mr. Easy also basically thought they overstepped their bounds, and I don't agree with that. I think they should be listening to what the users say and what the users want. So 3 of the 4 current members of the board, of the RCD board, I believe you as supervisors appointed. And unfortunately, there has been a handful, I believe 4 or 5 chronic water users, that have been chronic complainers in the water users, and that's of about roughly 240 users. There's been 4 or 5, and some of those have notable influence in the community, and they have notable financial resources, and they've used them through lawsuits and other ways to intimidate and basically try to get what they want. And they've essentially eviscerated the RCD and the Water Master Service by what they've done. And as a water user, I'm not happy about that. And I'm afraid this old decree of ours has stood since 1940, and there's not many people left alive today, if any. I think there are a few here. But what occurs is, oftentimes words have different meanings, and people argue over what the words in a decree say. And I just fear that our decree is at the end of its life, and we're going to have to reopen the whole damn decree. I don't think any of us want that, but I think we're being pushed into that. So I want you to know that. And I'll give you an example of that. The Sustainable Groundwater Act, you're all aware of that. The word sustainable wasn't defined in that act. And there's going to be lawsuits from every little faction fighting over what the word sustainable means. So that's just an example of how one word can be litigated. We all probably know what sustainable means, but it's going to be litigated. And there's words in our decree that's going to be litigated. I'm personally was involved in a case that went clear to the appellate level over one single word in our decree. And I don't like that, and I hope it comes to an end. And I really know that your hands are somewhat tied in what authority you may have, but I think you need to know some facts. And I don't know what the answers are, but I look to your wisdom, and I think we have to pull together because this has been a very divisive subject matter in our community. Thank you.
Mrs. Bodie.
If it's possible, I'd like to take the 2 subjects separately. I'm sure you guys are just ready to listen to all this.
You still want to hear anything we've already heard?
All right. This is my first handout. I guess you probably more than one to I don't remember. Late getting here this morning trying to get this stuff. Good. Have a separate handout, and I'll give it later when we talk about the RCD vacancy. I usually don't need a microphone. I learned to whisper in a sawmill. So, anyway, I'm Larry Bodie, and the first subject that was brought up this morning is the Water Master Service. What I've handed out is a petition. It's not up to the 15% that we're talking about yet, but because of the actions taken by the RCD board, the group of people have already went ahead and started a petition They've already contacted a water rights attorney. They're ready to go get action before the court over this whole water master mess. And I guess, as I have stated before, and I think most of us have come to the realization, the fix of this is almost an impossible thing. And I guess I've come to the conclusion that it's going to take the court to fix it. Nobody else. I don't think you guys have the authority, nor do we, or anything else. And there are some simple fixes that could really make this thing work. Because the WAC committee, which was presented with the same problem, and to be honest with you, the WAC committee was looking into moving the Water Master Service long before the current issues came up to everybody. We realized that the Water Master Service was destroying the RCD. In fact, the RCD has not done an effective job of RCD work, the kinds of things it should be doing in over 3 years. And the Water Master Service has just ended up dominating. It's become a water board, for lack of a better term. And to me, the fix, I don't want to belabor this too much, is fairly simple. I put in your packet the first page of a contract for George Pendle. He's water master down in Orland. And I outlined the simple term right there at the beginning. And to me, this would resolve the issue if the court sees fit. And I understand there's a superior court, I don't know the name, that's done the same thing that I'm presenting. And that's under the term. This agreement shall be for the initial term of 1 year. This is the contract of water master. And for successive year periods thereafter, unless ordered or terminated by the court. Basically, when you go through this contract, the water master works for the court. And that's where the bulk of the issue keeps coming up. The people on this board keep thinking that they are water masters. And they are not. They are a lay board. They do not have the knowledge or the ability to water master. Anybody that knows anything about water mastering will quickly show you why it won't work. They cannot go out and measure the water. They don't have the technicality to measure the water. They don't have the knowledge of a decree for the water. But they are constantly looked at to be water master. They are referred to as water master. And this is the misnomer that has got us into all this trouble. I went back and checked with DWR, and when the courts have assigned the duties to DWR, in fact, the state code even refers to it. When that assignment is made, they refer to DWR as water master. But their code, the state code, very quickly makes that DWR assigns a water master, a person who is technically trained to go out and do the job. Unfortunately, we ended up giving the term deputy water master, which implies you're down here, guy. This board up here is all God Almighty for the water master. And that's the misnomer. We hire this technical person to go out there and do the job of being water master. And that is the true water master of our system. And to me, if the court will really recognize that, make that happen, and the RCD becomes only the administrator of getting a water master when needed, getting the funds under the guise of the court, and carrying it all out, to me, I think the issue would be solved. Because what we got into in the WAC meeting, that if we, and as I brought up to you guys 2 weeks ago, if it goes to you, you will become the political problem. I guarantee it. If it goes to reform a district, in which we are strongly looked into, and we did this as a committee when we first set this thing up, that district will have the same problems. As long as that misnomer is that people can politically control water through the board. And the board has no authority or the ability to change any of the decreed items. And that's where it needs to be instead. And I'm going to reemphasize the grand jury letter. I think I've handed it out to you guys before. And there's more to this. But if you read what the grand jury came up with, and I'm getting the feeling from our board members that the grand jury is just some penny-ass thing that doesn't amount to anything, because it was brought out very quickly that this is not this new board's policy. But if you read this policy that was generated in answer to the grand jury questions that came up a couple of years ago, first by letting that water master work for the court, the second thing is that the RCD board does not take on any issues unless it comes up through that WAC committee. But as long as you have people on that RCD board that has no use for the WAC committee and thinks they're a bunch of useless people out there, we got problems. And to me, the solution is sitting right here in front of us. And it's all got to come from the judge. That's enough on the water master stuff. I think it's, like I say, it's going in a direction, and hopefully the court will get together and resolve this issue. I understand Mr. Gaines, I saw that in the paper, I guess I'll just touch on it, also is going to try to solve our problem. And what I understand there, and this is when I talked to LAFCO about some of our problems here, that the reason Mr. Gaines made, and they told me to go to Mr. Dolly as well, that I guess there is a way to form a district by the state legislature can form a district, which would cut down a big part of the cost of forming a district. When we looked into this years ago, there was two things you had to do. One was to lay out the boundaries, and the second thing was there's a legal document you have to go through, and that's very costly. When we were doing this years ago, it was going to cost us somewhere from $35,000 to $50,000. Well, I understand the state legislature, and they're doing this up in Boulder County on a water district, can direct a district, and that would be the help that somebody could do. But like I say, I think if we have a district, we have the same problems. We just put it over with another board, and they're going to have the same people creating the same issues. Enough said about that. Any questions for me?